My name is Audrey Walker, and I'm 29 years old. I always knew I was invisible in my family, but nothing prepared me for my sister Rachel's wedding day. When my mother Diana raised her crystal champagne flute and announced, "To the daughter who truly deserves everything," something inside me finally snapped. I wasn't even sitting at the family table, just another calculated insult in a lifetime of them. I swallowed my pride, stood up, and said 6 words that changed everything. You'll remember this day, just not for the reason you think. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're viewing from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been the family underdog. Trust me, this revenge story is worth sticking around for. Growing up in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood, I learned early on that my existence was secondary. Rachel, my older sister by 3 years, was the sun our family orbited around. From the moment she was born, she had been blessed with everything I wasn't: natural blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, our mother's striking blue eyes, and the kind of effortless charisma that made everyone from teachers to strangers fall in love with her. Our childhood home, a restored Victorian brownstone filled with antiques and family heirlooms, might as well have been a shrine to Rachel's accomplishments. The living room wall displayed her debate team trophies, honor roll certificates, and later, her Harvard acceptance letter framed in ornate gold. My academic achievements, consistently A's and B's at a respected private school, were acknowledged with distracted nods and quick, "That's nice, sweetie," comments before the conversation inevitably turned back to Rachel. My earliest memory of this imbalance was my 6th birthday. Mom had promised a small party with my friends from school, but when Rachel suddenly needed to attend an important soccer tournament that same weekend, my celebration was postponed indefinitely. It was never rescheduled. Instead, I got a cupcake with a candle stuck in it after Rachel's team won their championship. "We're celebrating 2 victories today," Dad had said, though everyone knew which victory mattered more. For Rachel's 16th birthday, our parents closed down an entire restaurant and hired a local band. For mine, Mom forgot to order a cake and hastily picked up a grocery store sheet cake with my name misspelled as Aubrey. I pretended not to notice. Our father Richard, a successful investment banker, worked long hours but always made time for Rachel's events. My softball games and school plays frequently found me scanning an audience where my parents' faces were conspicuously absent. "Your father has an important client," Mom would explain later, or "I had a terrible migraine." Yet they never missed Rachel's performances, even rescheduling business trips to accommodate her schedule. High school only widened the gap. While Rachel was elected homecoming queen, class president, and graduated valedictorian, I found my niche in digital arts and computer science, interests my parents dismissed as playing on computers. When I was accepted to Northeastern University with a partial scholarship for graphic design, Mom's response was, "Well, at least it's in Boston." Not Harvard, of course, but it's something. Rachel's Harvard graduation warranted a weekend-long celebration with relatives flying in from across the country. When I graduated with honors from Northeastern, Mom suggested maybe lunch somewhere nice before remembering Rachel had an important job interview that day. The lunch never happened. Despite all this, I built a successful career as a digital marketing specialist at a top Boston agency. My salary surpassed many of my peers. I maintained a small but loyal circle of friends. And I even purchased my own condo in Somerville at 27, an achievement in Boston's brutal real estate market. None of this seemed to register with my family. When Rachel announced her engagement to Jason Blackwell, heir to a commercial real estate empire and her boyfriend of 18 months, my parents were ecstatic. Finally, my mother gushed during their engagement dinner, "The wedding we've always dreamed of." I wondered if she realized I was sitting right there, still single and apparently not the daughter whose wedding they'd been dreaming about. The wedding planning consumed our family for the next year. Every Sunday dinner became a forum for discussing flower arrangements, venue options, and guest lists. My opinions were neither solicited nor acknowledged when offered. I watched my mother and sister create a Pinterest board together, shop for the perfect dress, and debate honeymoon destinations while I sat on the periphery, simultaneously present and invisible. 3 months before the wedding, I discovered I wasn't even in the bridal party. The revelation came accidentally through a group email about bridesmaid dress fittings where my name was conspicuously absent. When I confronted Rachel, her response was cutting. "I just want my closest friends standing with me. You understand, right?" I didn't understand. Not at all. When I approached my mother about it, her dismissal was equally painful. "Audrey, this is Rachel's day. She gets to make these decisions, not you. Please don't make this difficult." The subtext was clear. My feelings were irrelevant compared to Rachel's perfect day. It was during this conversation in my parents' kitchen that I first felt something harden inside me, a small, sharp crystal of resentment that had been forming for years suddenly solidified into something I couldn't ignore. For the first time, I began to wonder if I even wanted to attend this wedding that so clearly established my place in the family hierarchy. But I would go. And as it turned out, attending my sister's wedding would become the most consequential decision of my life. The week before Rachel's wedding arrived with the inevitability of a slow-moving train wreck. Each pre-wedding event served as another reminder of my peripheral status in the family. The bridal shower, held at the Boston Harbor Hotel's presidential suite, featured 30 women sipping champagne and watching Rachel open lavish gifts. I'd spent 2 weeks' salary on a handcrafted crystal vase I knew she'd admired, only to receive a perfunctory thank you before she moved on to the next package. My mother didn't even acknowledge my gift, though she cooed over the monogram towels from Rachel's college roommate for nearly 5 minutes. I sat at a table with distant cousins who kept confusing my name, alternating between Aubrey and Ashley despite having known me my entire life. One particularly painful moment came when Aunt Patricia patted my hand and said, "Don't worry, dear. Your turn will come someday," as though my primary purpose at 29 was securing a husband similar to Jason. The bachelorette party in New York City should have been fun, a weekend of fancy dinners, dancing, and celebrations. But Rachel's maid of honor Amanda treated me like an unwanted tag-along. I wasn't included in the matching bride tribe robes, and at dinner, there wasn't a place card with my name at the long table. I ended up squeezing in at the far end, drinking too much wine to numb the humiliation. The rehearsal dinner at the Langham the night before the wedding was an elegant affair for 60 people. Jason's family, the prestigious Blackwells of Blackwell Properties, were out in full force. His father Gregory, a distinguished man with silver hair and the confident posture of old money, kept glancing between Rachel and me with a slightly puzzled expression, as though trying to reconcile how we could be sisters while being treated so differently. His mother Elizabeth, impeccably dressed in Chanel, pulled me aside during cocktail hour. "Audrey, isn't it? You're sitting with us tomorrow at the reception, I hope?" When I explained I was seated at table 19 with my mother's distant work colleagues, her perfectly manicured eyebrows rose slightly. How unusual. I've never attended a wedding where immediate family wasn't seated together. I manufactured a smile and some excuse about table arrangements, but Elizabeth's observation stung because it confirmed what I already knew: my treatment wasn't normal. It was calculated. Later that evening, I excused myself to use the restroom and took a wrong turn down a hallway. Before I could redirect, I heard Rachel's voice from a small anteroom, followed by my mother's distinctive laugh. "Can you believe Audrey wore that dress tonight? Navy blue to a rehearsal dinner. It's like she's deliberately trying to look drab." Rachel's voice dripped with disdain. "At least she's easy to overlook," my mother replied. "I've seated her far from the main tables tomorrow. We don't need her awkwardness ruining your perfect day." They laughed together, the sound of their shared amusement like glass shattering inside my chest. I stood frozen, my hand pressed against the wall for support. Did you see Elizabeth talking to her? God knows what she was saying. Probably wondering how we're even related. Rachel's voice again, followed by the sound of ice clinking in a glass. Well, we've always known which daughter got the good genes, haven't we? My mother's voice was soft with affection. I backed away silently, my cheeks burning with humiliation and anger. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. I had my father's hazel eyes and dark brown hair, features that had always made me the outlier in a family of blondes. But it wasn't my appearance that made me different. It was that I refused to play the games Rachel excelled at, refused to manipulate and charm my way into being the center of attention. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect June days that brides dream about. Despite everything, I arrived early at the Four Seasons to help with preparations. A decision I quickly regretted when Rachel immediately put me to work steaming bridesmaids' dresses while she and my mother sipped mimosas. Audrey, be careful with Amanda's dress, it's silk. Rachel barked when I picked up a lavender gown. Actually, maybe let someone else handle that one. I bit my tongue and continued working, determined to maintain my dignity. Around noon, one of the hotel staff entered with lunch for the bridal party. When I reached for a sandwich, Rachel slapped my hand away. That's for the bridesmaids, she snapped. There should be something for the others in the next room. There wasn't. I ended up buying a protein bar from a vending machine in the hotel gym. As the afternoon progressed, Rachel's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She screamed at a makeup artist for using the wrong shade of eyeshadow, made a bridesmaid cry over a slightly crooked seam, and nearly fired the photographer for suggesting a pose she didn't like. My mother enabled every tantrum, cooing that her princess deserved perfection. During a rare moment alone, I ducked into the bridal suite to retrieve my phone charger. Rachel's designer purse had tipped over on the vanity, spilling its contents. As I moved to write it, a small leather notebook caught my eye, one I recognized as belonging to our father's office. Curiosity overtook me, and I flipped it open. Inside were bank statements and transfer records, all from our family's business accounts. With growing horror, I realized I was looking at evidence of systematic embezzlement. Rachel had been siphoning money from our father's investment firm for at least 2 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars transferred to offshore accounts. My hands trembled as I quickly photographed several pages with my phone. I had just replaced the notebook when Rachel's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Normally, I would never invade someone's privacy by reading their messages, but after what I'd just discovered, my moral compass was severely compromised. The text preview from Marcus B. Reed. Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. Our special champagne toast in room 718 after reception. Marcus Baxter was Jason's best man and supposedly Rachel's former flame from college. The implication was unmistakable. I quickly took a screenshot, my mind racing. My perfect sister was not only stealing from our family, but was apparently planning to cheat on her husband on their wedding night. For a moment, I considered storming out, calling my father, exposing everything. But a lifetime of being dismissed and disbelieved gave me pause. This required strategy, not impulse. I pocketed my phone, straightened my shoulders, and went a dress for my sister's wedding with a completely different mindset than I'd had that morning. I would attend this wedding. I would witness everything. And, for once in my life, I would not be overlooked. The Boston Seaport Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into a fairy tale setting that screamed both money and meticulous planning. 10,000 white roses and hydrangeas created an atmosphere of ethereal elegance. Crystal chandeliers draped with silk ribbons cast a soft glow over the 400 guests, and a string quartet played Pachelbel's canon as attendees filed in. Despite arriving early, I was ushered to a seat in the back row, far from where my extended family was being seated near the front. My cousin Melissa, whom I hadn't seen in years, gave me a confused wave from her prime position 7 rows ahead. I forced a smile and pretended this arrangement was perfectly normal. "Isn't the sister of the bride usually seated with family?" whispered the elderly woman beside me. A great aunt of Jason's I'd briefly met at the rehearsal dinner. "Usually," I replied softly, fixing my gaze forward. At precisely 4 o'clock, the ceremony began. The bridesmaids, 8 of Rachel's closest friends and sorority sisters, processed down the aisle in flowing lavender gowns, each carrying a bouquet of white peonies. I recognized women I'd grown up with, girls who had been in and out of our house since elementary school. Any one of them could have been replaced by me, had Rachel wanted her only sister in her wedding party. The music swelled, and Rachel appeared at the back of the hall on our father's arm. I had to admit she looked stunning. Her dress was a custom Vera Wang creation, a strapless mermaid silhouette with delicate crystal beading that caught the light with every step. Her hair was styled in an intricate updo with loose tendrils framing her face, and her makeup enhanced her natural beauty without overpowering it. Our father beamed with pride as he walked her down the aisle. I hadn't seen him smile like that at any of my accomplishments, not when I graduated with honors, not when I landed my first major client, not when I bought my condo without any financial help from them. The ceremony itself was predictably perfect. Rachel and Jason exchanged personalized vows that brought many guests to tears. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the room erupted in applause. I clapped too, mechanically, my mind elsewhere. After the ceremony, guests were directed to an adjacent ballroom for cocktails while the main space was transformed for the reception. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting the occasional greeting, but mostly observing. Rachel and Jason were at the center of a constant swarm of well-wishers, while my mother fluttered nearby, accepting compliments on the exquisite wedding she had orchestrated. My father stood with a group of business associates, champagne in hand, laughing at something Gregory Blackwell had said. I approached, hoping for at least some acknowledgement. "Audrey," he said, noticing me. "There you are. Have you met everyone? This is Harold Simmons from Fidelity, and of course you know Gregory." I smiled and exchanged pleasantries, but before I could engage further, my father was pulled away by my mother to meet the Andersons from Connecticut. He departed with a distracted pat on my shoulder. When it was time to enter the reception, I discovered that table 19 was actually positioned near the service entrance, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement. My tablemates included my mother's former assistant from 15 years ago, a distant cousin who kept calling me Rachel's little sister, and several business associates who clearly had been invited out of obligation rather than desire. From my position, I had a clear view of the head table where Rachel and Jason sat with their wedding party. My parents were seated at table 1, along with Jason's parents and several prominent Boston families. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was an afterthought, unworthy of sitting with my own family. The reception began with the introduction of the wedding party, followed by Rachel and Jason's first dance to At Last by Etta James. They moved gracefully across the dance floor, looking every bit the perfect couple. I wondered if Jason knew about Marcus, or about the money Rachel had been stealing. Dinner was a 5-course gourmet meal featuring lobster bisque, filet mignon, and Chilean sea bass. The wine was a limited vintage Cabernet that probably cost more per bottle than I spent on groceries each week. At my table, conversation was stilted and awkward. No one quite knew why they were seated with the sister of the bride, and I offered no explanation. Throughout the meal, I watched my mother fuss over Rachel, adjusting her veil, ensuring her water glass was full, signaling servers to bring fresh bread to the head table. Not once did she glance in my direction or check if I needed anything. As dessert was being served, an elaborate wedding cake accompanied by individual chocolate soufflés, I excused myself to use the restroom. Instead, I slipped into a quiet corner and examined the evidence I'd gathered on my phone. The embezzlement records were clear and damning. The text messages between Rachel and Marcus, which I'd managed to screenshot more of during cocktail hour when Rachel had left her phone unattended, were explicit and left no doubt about their planned rendezvous. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. What I was considering would permanently alter our family dynamics. There would be no coming back from this. For a moment, I thought about simply leaving, walking out of this wedding where I was clearly unwanted and never looking back. But then I remembered my mother's voice. We've always known which daughter got the good genes, haven't we? And Rachel's dismissive, at least she's easy to overlook. A lifetime of being the afterthought, the less than. The invisible daughter crystallized into a single moment of clarity. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was resolved. I returned to my seat just as the MC announced it was time for toasts. The best man went first, delivering a speech about Jason's integrity and the beautiful future the couple would share. The maid of honor followed with anecdotes about Rachel's perfection and how she deserved every happiness. Then my mother stood, champagne glass in hand, and the room quieted. My mother looked radiant in her designer gown, her blonde hair styled in an elegant updo that made her appear a decade younger than her 58 years. She tapped her crystal flute gently with a silver spoon, though the room had already fallen silent in anticipation. When Rachel was born, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the perfect acoustics of the ballroom. I knew immediately she was special. Some children just have that spark, that indefinable quality that makes them shine brighter than others. My fingers tightened around my own champagne glass as I felt several people at my table glance uncomfortably in my direction. Throughout her life, Rachel has exemplified everything a parent could hope for in a daughter. Her intelligence, her beauty, her charm, all exceptional. Harvard graduate, philanthropist, and now, the wife of the wonderful Jason Blackwell. Mom paused to dab at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. The theatrical gesture was so typically her that I almost laughed. As a mother, there's nothing more fulfilling than seeing your child find happiness with someone who truly appreciates their worth. Jason, she turned toward my new brother-in-law, you've chosen well. And Rachel, her voice softened with emotion, you've always been my pride and joy. She raised her glass higher, her diamond bracelet catching the light. I'd like everyone to join me in a toast to the daughter who truly deserves everything. To Rachel. The room erupted in applause and cheers. To Rachel. Echoed throughout the ballroom as guests raised their glasses. I lifted mine mechanically, not drinking, my eyes fixed on my sister. Rachel's expression as she accepted the toast was a masterpiece of false modesty, but when her gaze shifted to me across the room, I caught the unmistakable smirk of triumph. It was brief, just a flicker of her lips, but in that moment, I knew she was savoring my public humiliation. The toast could have been simply to Rachel or to the bride and groom. Instead, my mother had deliberately chosen words that established a hierarchy between her daughters in front of hundreds of witnesses. It wasn't an oversight. It was a declaration. A strange calm settled over me then. 29 years of seeking approval, of making excuses for their behavior, of telling myself that family dynamics were complicated, all of it crystallized into perfect clarity. This wasn't complicated. This was cruelty, plain and simple. I stood up. The movement was unexpected enough that several people turned to look at me, including my mother, who appeared momentarily startled before her expression hardened into irritation. I'd like to add something, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. The room didn't immediately quiet. A murmur of conversation continued as people returned to their desserts, assuming whatever I had to say wouldn't be important. The MC, sensing an unplanned moment, hesitantly handed me a microphone. The feedback whine cut through the chatter. And suddenly I had everyone's attention. For those who don't know me, I'm Audrey Walker, Rachel's sister. I paused, letting the implication sink in. I just wanted to say that my sister has always been exceptional at getting exactly what she wants. And she's right, today is a day none of us will forget. I looked directly at Rachel, whose smirk had vanished. You'll remember this day, just not for the reason you think. I handed the microphone back to the startled MC and walked calmly toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear my mother's voice, high and strained. Well, let's continue with the celebration. DJ, I think it's time for the father-daughter dance. In the lobby, I waited for the elevator, my heart pounding despite my outward composure. I had exactly 57 minutes before my plan would execute. Just enough time. The hotel's business center was empty at this hour. I logged into one of the computers and accessed my cloud storage where I'd already uploaded the evidence I'd gathered. With methodical precision, I created a scheduled mass email to be delivered to every guest at the wedding, attaching the proof of Rachel's embezzlement and infidelity. I'd collected all the email addresses from the wedding website's RSVP system weeks ago, a simple task for someone with my digital marketing background. I made sure to include the Blackwell family business email list, which was publicly available on their corporate website. The message was simple. The truth about Rachel Walker Blackwell. Evidence of embezzlement from Walker Investment Group. See attached bank records. Evidence of ongoing affair with Marcus Baxter. Including plans to meet tonight in room 718. See attached text message screenshots. Witness statements from Walker Investment Group employees confirming unauthorized access to accounts. See attached signed statements. I had been gathering those witness statements quietly for weeks, after first noticing discrepancies in the company accounts during a routine website update I'd helped with. People were surprisingly willing to talk once I mentioned the unusual transactions. I scheduled the email for 9:15 p.m., precisely when the cake cutting was scheduled to occur. According to the detailed timeline my mother had distributed to the wedding party. After confirming the scheduled send, I deleted my browsing history, logged out, and returned to the reception. I slipped back into my seat just as the father-daughter dance was concluding. No one at my table seemed to have noticed my absence, another small reminder of my invisibility that, for once, worked in my favor. The next 45 minutes passed in a blur of forced smiles and mechanical small talk. I watched Rachel and Jason move from table to table, thanking guests for coming. They skipped table 19 entirely. My father approached briefly, perhaps sensing something was amiss after my impromptu speech. "Everything all right, Audrey?" he asked, his expression more concerned with potential disruption than with my well-being. "Everything's exactly as it should be, Dad," I replied, giving him the same bland smile I'd perfected over years of family gatherings. He nodded, satisfied with my apparent compliance, and returned to the important guests. At 9:10, I excused myself to use the restroom, timing my return to coincide with the cake cutting. Rachel and Jason had just approached the towering 6-tier confection, a silver cake knife in their joined hands, when the first phone chimed with an email notification. Then another, and another. Soon, the ballroom was filled with the sound of hundreds of phones alerting simultaneously. I took my seat and watched as the cascade of truth began to unfold. The first indication that something was wrong came from table 3, where a prominent Boston attorney suddenly exclaimed, "What the hell?" loud enough to turn heads. At the Blackwell family table, Jason's mother Elizabeth was staring at her phone, her perfectly composed face draining of color. Rachel and Jason remained frozen by the wedding cake, the knife poised to make the first cut. Confused by the sudden disruption, the photographer hovered awkwardly, waiting for the traditional cake-cutting photos that would never happen. The DJ, misreading the situation, cheerfully announced, "Let's have the happy couple cut the cake." His voice echoed uncomfortably through the now quieting room. I watched as Jason's father Gregory checked his phone, his expression shifting from annoyance to shock to fury in the span of seconds. He showed the screen to Elizabeth, whose hand flew to her mouth. Across the room, phones continued to chime as the email reached more guests. The murmuring grew louder. People began to glance between their screens and Rachel with expressions ranging from disbelief to disgust. My father, always attuned to shifts in social dynamics, sensed something was wrong and checked his own phone. I saw the exact moment he accessed the email. His face went slack, then hardened as he opened the first attachment. He looked up at Rachel with an expression I'd never seen before, pure, unfiltered disappointment. Rachel, still oblivious to the specific cause of the disruption, but clearly sensing something was terribly wrong, plastered on a brittle smile. Is everything okay? Let's cut the cake, shall we? That's when Marcus Baxter, the best man, made the critical mistake of trying to flee. He stood abruptly from the head table and headed for the exit, drawing all eyes to his panicked departure. Jason, confused, called after him, "Marcus? Where are you going?" Then Jason's phone chimed. He reluctantly checked it, keeping one hand on the cake knife, his other hand dropping to his side as he read the screen. His face contorted in disbelief, then anguish, then rage. "What is this?" he asked Rachel, his voice dangerously quiet. "What the hell is this, Rachel?" Rachel's artificial smile faltered. "What's what, honey?" "I don't know what." "Room 718? Jason's voice rose slightly. "Tonight? With Marcus?" The room fell completely silent. Even the DJ stopped the background music, perhaps finally sensing the gravity of what was unfolding. Rachel's face drained of color. That's not someone's playing a prank, obviously." "A prank?" Jason thrust his phone toward her. "With screenshots of your texts? Dating back months? Is the money a prank too?" "The hundreds of thousands you've apparently been stealing from your family's company." At the mention of money, my father surged forward. "Rachel, my office. Now." His voice was like ice. Rachel's composure cracked entirely. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the sea of faces all staring at their phones, then at her. She looked like a cornered animal. "This is ridiculous." She attempted, her voice shrill. "Someone's obviously fabricated." "The bank records have transaction timestamps," Rachel, my father, interrupted. "And your signature. Your personal authorization codes that only you have access to." Diana, my mother, had finally checked her own phone and now stood frozen, one hand clutching the edge of table one for support. For the first time in my life, I saw her speechless, the careful facade of family perfection she'd maintained for decades crumbling before her eyes. "I can explain," Rachel began. But Jason cut her off. "Explain what? That you've been sleeping with my best friend? That you're a thief? That our entire relationship has been a lie?" His voice broke on the last word, raw pain evident in every syllable. Gregory Blackwell approached, his face thunderous. "Jason, we're leaving." He turned to Rachel with a look of utter contempt. "Our family attorney will be in contact regarding annulment proceedings." Elizabeth Blackwell, always the proper society matron, simply said, "I knew something wasn't right about this family." Before following her husband and devastated son toward the exit, the room erupted in chaos. Guests began gathering their belongings, some leaving quickly to avoid the unfolding drama, others lingering to witness the spectacular implosion of what had been, just minutes before, the wedding of the season. Rachel, finally grasping the magnitude of her exposure, turned wild eyes toward me. In that moment, she knew. I saw the realization dawn on her face. The only person who had both motive and access to all this information was me, the overlooked sister. "You," she hissed, lunging toward me. "You did this." Our father intercepted her, gripping her arm firmly. "Enough, Rachel. You've done enough damage." "But she ruined my wedding." Rachel shrieked, mascara beginning to streak down her cheeks as tears of fury spilled over. "She's always been jealous of me. Always wanted what I have." "What you have," my father said grimly, "is a serious legal problem. Both with the Blackwells and with me. $2 million, Rachel. $2 million missing from client accounts. The guests still remaining fell into stunned silence at this revelation. My mother finally found her voice. There must be some mistake, Richard. Rachel wouldn't. The evidence is right here, Diana, my father snapped, holding up his phone. Bank transfers to offshore accounts. Text messages discussing how to move the money without detection. It's all here. Marcus had been caught by Jason's cousins before he could escape and was now being forcibly returned to the ballroom, looking terrified. Is it true? Jason demanded, getting in Marcus's face. Have you been sleeping with my wife? Today? On my wedding day? Marcus's silence was confirmation enough. Jason's fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crack, sending the best man sprawling across the dance floor. I remained seated at table 19, watching the scene unfold with a strange sense of detachment. This wasn't how I'd imagined the evening progressing. I'd expected anger directed at me, accusations of jealousy, perhaps even being thrown out of the reception. I hadn't anticipated the complete implosion of my sister's carefully constructed facade or my father's immediate focus on the embezzlement rather than the messenger. As security personnel responded to the physical altercation, the wedding coordinator frantically tried to restore order, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. The DJ had packed up his equipment and was quietly slipping out a side door. The lavish cake stood abandoned, the ceremonial first cut never made. Rachel's gaze found me again across the chaos. This isn't over, she mouthed, her face contorted with hatred. For the first time in my life, I held my sister's gaze without flinching. I wasn't afraid anymore. The worst had happened, the family secrets were exposed, the perfect daughter revealed as a fraud, and I was still standing. As the beautiful reception devolved into chaos around me, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. 29 years of being the family disappointment, of measuring myself against an impossible standard, of accepting scraps of attention and affection, it ended tonight. Whatever came next, I would face it as a woman who had finally found her voice. The grand ballroom emptied quickly after security escorted Marcus out and the Blackwell family departed en masse. Distant relatives and business associates hurried away, avoiding eye contact with anyone from the Walker family, embarrassed to have witnessed such a spectacular fall from grace. I remained seated, strangely calm amid the wreckage of crystal glasses and abandoned dessert plates. The elaborate floral centerpieces, which had cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, now seemed gaudy and excessive rather than elegant. A hotel staff member approached tentatively. Miss? We've been asked to clear the room. The, event appears to be concluded. I nodded and gathered my small clutch purse. Yes, I believe it is. In the lobby, I found my parents and Rachel in a heated argument, their voices low but intense. Rachel still wore her wedding gown, though her carefully styled hair had begun to collapse, and her makeup was streaked with tears of rage rather than joy. We need to go somewhere private, my father said when he noticed me approaching. His face was ashen, the lines around his mouth deeper than I'd ever seen them. A hotel manager appeared, seeming both concerned and anxious to have the drama moved away from the public areas. The Wellington Suite is available if you need a private space, Mr. Walker. My father nodded grimly. That would be appreciated. The Wellington Suite was a spacious meeting room with a conference table and comfortable chairs. As soon as the door closed behind us, Rachel exploded. How could you do this to me? She screamed, lunging toward me again. My father held her back. My wedding day. You ruined everything because you've always been jealous. I met her gaze steadily. I didn't steal $2 million from Dad's company, Rachel. I didn't plan to cheat on my husband the night of my wedding. I just made sure everyone knew who you really are. You little bitch, she spat. You think you're so much better than me? So moral and perfect? You did this because you couldn't stand seeing me happy. Happy? I laughed, the sound surprising even me. You weren't happy, Rachel. You were winning. There's a difference. Both of you. Stop it, my mother interjected, She turned to me, her expression a mixture of fury and bewilderment. Audrey, how could you embarrass this family like this? If you had concerns, you should have come to us privately. Like you came to me privately when you and Rachel were laughing about keeping me in my place. I asked quietly. Or like you came to me privately when you decided I shouldn't be in the wedding party. Or be seated with my own family. My mother flushed. That's different. This was Rachel's day. It's always been Rachel's day, I interrupted. My entire life has been Rachel's day. My father, who had been reviewing the evidence on his phone while we argued, finally looked up. The money transfers are real, he said, his voice heavy. Rachel, these are actual records from our company accounts. Transactions authorized with your credentials. Your signature. Money transferred to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Rachel's strategy shifted instantly. Her expression crumpled, and fresh tears filled her eyes. Daddy, I can explain. I was going to pay it all back. I just needed to. To what? He demanded. To steal from our clients? People who trusted us with their life savings? What possible explanation could there be? Jason's family, she said quickly. They have standards, expectations. I needed to keep up, to show I belonged in their world. The clothes, the vacations, the lifestyle. So you committed a felony. My father's voice rose for the first time. You put our entire firm at risk? For shopping trips. Rachel turned to our mother. Mom, please. You understand. You always said presentation matters, that we have to maintain appearances. Not like this, my mother whispered, looking genuinely shaken. Rachel, not like this. I watched as my sister's manipulative tactics failed her for perhaps the first time in her life. The golden daughter mask was slipping, revealing the selfish, calculating woman beneath. And the affair with Marcus? My father asked, his voice quieter now but no less intense. Was that about keeping up appearances too? Rachel's face hardened. Jason is boring. He talks about real estate development and golf. Marcus is exciting. You were married for 6 hours, I said incredulously. 6 hours, Rachel. She whirled on me. None of this would have come out if you hadn't been so spiteful. This is your fault. No, my father said firmly. This is your doing, Rachel. Yours alone. For the first time in my memory. My father was not defending Rachel or making excuses for her behavior. The shock of it seemed to hit my sister and mother simultaneously. Richard, my mother began. Surely we can fix this. The Blackwells. The Blackwells will never speak to us again, my father interrupted. And that's the least of our problems. If clients find out about the embezzlement, the firm could face serious regulatory consequences. I could lose my license. Daddy, please, Rachel tried again. Her voice taking on the childish quality that had always worked on him in the past. I made a mistake. I'll fix it. How? He demanded. How will you fix this, Rachel? She had no answer. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the familiar family dynamics reasserting themselves, even in this extreme situation. I'm leaving. You don't get to just walk away from this. My mother snapped. You deliberately humiliated our family in front of everyone who matters in Boston. I turned to her, really seeing her for perhaps the first time, not as the intimidating maternal figure who had always found me wanting, but as a deeply flawed woman who had created and enabled the monster that was Rachel. No, Mom. Rachel humiliated our family by stealing and cheating. I just made sure she couldn't hide it anymore. Why now? My father asked, his voice softer. Why today, Audrey? I looked at him, this man who had always been a peripheral figure in my life, present but never truly seeing me. Because I was invisible until I wasn't. Because Mom raised her glass and toasted the daughter who truly deserves everything, while I sat with strangers instead of my family. Because after 29 years of being treated like I didn't matter, I finally decided that I do. The silence that followed was profound. My mother looked away first, something like shame flickering across her features before her mask of composure returned. The damage is done, my father finally said. Rachel, you'll return every cent tomorrow morning. We'll meet with the firm's attorneys to discuss how to handle this legally. And what about me? Rachel asked, gesturing to her wedding dress. My life is ruined. You ruined it yourself. I said quietly. And for what it's worth, I think you'll land on your feet. You always do. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. I won't be at Sunday dinner anymore. I think we all need some space to figure out what kind of relationship we want going forward, if any. Audrey, my father called as I opened the door. I turned back. He seemed to struggle for words before simply saying, I'm sorry. 2 words, too late, but something shifted inside me nonetheless. A tiny crack in the wall of resentment I'd built over decades. Me too, Dad, I replied. And then I walked out, leaving behind the ruins of my sister's perfect day and, perhaps, the beginning of my own liberation. 3 months after what Boston society now referred to as the Walker wedding disaster, I sat in my Somerville condo, watching late September sunlight filter through the leaves of the maple tree outside my window. The peaceful moment was a stark contrast to the turmoil that had followed Rachel's wedding day. As I had predicted, Rachel landed on her feet, somewhat, after the embezzlement was discovered. My father had worked with the firm's attorneys to quietly return all stolen funds to client accounts before any regulatory bodies became involved. To avoid criminal charges, Rachel had been required to sign a legally binding agreement to repay every cent she'd taken, resulting in the sale of her luxury condo and most of her designer possessions. The marriage to Jason had been annulled within weeks. The Blackwell family, understandably humiliated and angry, had closed ranks around Jason and ensured that the specific details of why the marriage ended remained private, though Boston's elite social circles buzzed with rumors. Marcus Baxter had left town entirely, reportedly taking a position with a financial firm in Chicago after Jason's father made it clear that no reputable company in Boston would hire him. As for my parents, the fallout had been complicated and ongoing. My father, faced with irrefutable evidence of his golden daughter's crimes, had experienced what appeared to be a genuine reckoning. The man who had spent decades overlooking Rachel's flaws and my existence had been forced to confront the consequences of his parenting choices. 2 weeks after the wedding, he had appeared at my door unannounced, looking older and more uncertain than I'd ever seen him. Can we talk? He'd asked, standing awkwardly in the hallway with a paper bag from my favorite bakery. Over coffee and pastries, my father had attempted something new for him. Honest conversation. I failed you, he'd said simply. I've been thinking about it constantly, looking back at your childhood, your accomplishments. How many of your school events did I miss? How many times did I brush aside your achievements while celebrating Rachel's? Too many to count, I'd answered truthfully. He'd nodded, accepting the pain in my words. I don't expect forgiveness, Audrey, but I want you to know I see it now. And I'm deeply ashamed. It wasn't an instant fix. Decades of emotional neglect couldn't be erased with one conversation, but it was a beginning. We'd agreed to meet monthly for lunch, a small step toward building something new from the ashes of our former relationship. My mother had taken longer to reach out. Her carefully constructed world of social standing and family perfection had crumbled spectacularly, and she'd retreated to their Cape Cod home for several weeks, avoiding the whispers and stares of Boston society. When she finally called, her voice had been different, subdued, lacking the authoritative tone I'd grown up with. I've been seeing a therapist, she'd said, the admission clearly difficult for her. She suggested I might have some issues with control and appearance, that I might have damaged my relationships because of it. That seems accurate, I'd replied, unwilling to make this easier for her. I don't know how to fix this, Audrey. I don't know if it can be fixed. Neither do I'd told her honestly. But recognizing there's a problem is supposedly the first step. We were taking tentative steps now, meeting occasionally for coffee in neutral locations. Sometimes we managed real conversation. Sometimes we retreated to superficial pleasantries when emotions ran too high. It was imperfect progress, but it was something. As for Rachel, our relationship remained fractured. She'd been forced to move to a small apartment in Brookline and take a position at a friend's marketing firm, a significant step down from her previous executive role. When we occasionally crossed paths at mandatory family events, she maintained a cold civility that barely masked her continuing resentment. I'd heard through family channels that she was seeing a wealthy divorce 20 years her senior, already plotting her next ascent up the social ladder. Some things never changed. A knock at my door pulled me from my reflections. I opened it to find Samantha, my closest friend and one of the few people who had stood by me throughout the wedding drama and its aftermath. "Ready for brunch?" she asked, stepping inside and giving me a quick hug. "I'm starving, and I want to hear about your date with coffee shop guy." I laughed, grabbing my purse. "It was just coffee, Sam. Not a big production." "After the year you've had, even coffee is progress," she replied with a grin. "Besides, he sounds nice. Normal. Completely unlike your drama tornado family." As we walked to our favorite local cafe, I reflected on how the wedding day that was supposed to be Rachel's triumph had instead become my liberation. The painful public exposure of family dynamics had forced changes that years of private suffering never could. I'd learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That family relationships should be reciprocal, not one-sided. That being overlooked isn't the same as being invisible unless you allow it to be. Most importantly, I'd learned that authentic living, however messy and imperfect, was infinitely preferable to the hollow perfection my family had cultivated for so long. Over avocado toast and mimosas, Samantha raised her glass. "To new beginnings and no more fake smiles." I clinked my glass against hers, smiling genuinely. "To being seen." The path forward wasn't entirely clear, and healing family wounds this deep would take time, if it happened at all. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't measuring my worth against Rachel's achievements or my parents' approval. I was writing my own story, one authentic day at a time. And that, I realized, was the victory I'd needed all along. If you've ever felt overlooked or undervalued by the people who should cherish you most, I hope my story gives you courage. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who treated you unfairly? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more true life stories, and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be invisible anymore. Thank you for listening. And may you find the strength to be authentically yourself in every situation.